Hello, everyone. I work in signatures and I get so many questions about my process. So I wanted to answer those questions in an easier way. I like to show what I'm talking about instead of a lengthy trying to answer the question kind of thing. It's just easier to um, show the answers. All right, so I'm going to try to address many of the questions that I get. Number one, the reason I like to work in signatures, and there's many reasons, okay? Number one, I can choose the paper. I can choose something really thick like watercolor paper or something really thin. If I wanted to use newspaper, I could, brown paper. If I want to use all kinds of different papers, it lets me choose what I use. I can make my pages different sizes. I love to do that. Um, I can make junk journals. I can do whatever I want to do. And I do it myself so I can choose the kind of paper that I am using. Number two, why I like signatures. I can work on a page and I am not fighting the other pages. I'm not fighting the cover. I can get it pretty flat so I can get to the ditch. I can deal with the page as it is. Um, I really like not having to fight with everything else. And another thing that I like about using signatures is many times I will glue things over the ditch here in the middle of the book, and if I let that, whatever it is, if it's, whatever, if I let it dry completely before I turn the page, there's a better chance that whatever I've glued in that spine is going to stay glued in that spine and not come up when I start turning the pages. Okay? And another thing I like about working in signatures is if I'm working on a project, I will make maybe 3 to 9 signatures. I have made 9 signatures for a single project. I can work in the book, work on my project, make a page. I like to leave them flat when they dry. I can put that signature aside and continue working on that project. I can work on another page while the other one is drying. So I'm not stuck with trying to put wax paper between my pages and risking the that it might stick. I can leave these flat and they can dry and I don't have to worry about them sticking to anything. They're not going to touch anything. Another reason I like to work in signatures, I don't have to worry about how thick they get. I can put as much stuff in these things as I want to, and that decides how big the cover is going to be. I can make the cover to fit. So I didn't have a good example because usually I work in the signatures until I am finished with the signatures and then I decide how big I need to make the cover. I make a cover. Sometimes it's a one-piece cover. Sometimes it's a different kind of cover. But I know how thick, how thick I need to make the spine to fit those pages. One more example of that. All right. So here is my Patreon napkin journal. It's huge. It has 9 signatures in it. 9. It's big. I've been working on it for a very long time. When I started working in these signatures, and this is almost done, they were pretty thin. I mean, they didn't take up a whole lot of space. But look how fat they are now. They have probably tripled, if not more, in the width of that. So when I'm going to go make a cover, number one, I can decide what kind of cover I want to make now. What will go with these signatures? What would I like? How big do I need to make it? I need to make the spine at least 2.5 inches wide. It's a big book. Um, so I like just doing what I want to do in the signatures first and then worrying about putting them in a cover that I get to make. Um, so when we're putting signatures, well, let's make the signatures first. You can choose the paper, any kind of paper. You can use different kinds of paper. You can use different sizes of paper. I love making my own signatures. I use a 3-hole pamphlet stitch, and I am putting up a new playlist. It is going to be, there's a link to it in the description box below. I use usually, especially when I'm using the same size paper, a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. It's really simple, it's really easy. I use just regular thread, cotton thread, thin thread. All I'm doing is holding those pieces of paper together while I work on them. The thread does not have to be very strong. And another reason I like to work in signatures, I backtrack just a little bit, backtrack just a tad. If I were to work on single sheets of paper, here, let's say that this is the collage or the art journal page that I did. Oh, I like that just the way it is. All right, so I'm going to make another one. Okay, here's another one. I think that's upside down. Here's another one. All right, like that. That's perfect. Okay, here's another one. And here's another one. All right, so I'm going to make a signature out of these pre-made pages. All I have to do is fold the paper in half, stack them in each other, and then I've got my signature. But it's missing its other half. It's no longer a 2-page spread, and this side might not even match the other side. So I'm unhappy. I don't like that. So I make the signature so that I can work in the signature so that I have a 2-page spread where both sides are the same page. My number one reason for working in signatures. That, and I don't have to fight the other pages. All right, so making the signatures, like I said, I use just a regular cotton thread, very, very thin. I usually use a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. For junk journals, things with different size pages, sometimes I'll use a 5-hole pamphlet stitch just so that those pages are anchored in more than one spot, more than 1 or 2 spots. The playlist Working in Signatures has how to do the 3-hole pamphlet stitch and how to sew the 5-hole pamphlet stitch. So I'm not going to go through that. But I just sew my pieces of paper together. Whatever I want to use, I sew them together, and then I start working in the signatures. I don't worry about making the cover until I'm finished with signatures. And then, when I'm finished with signatures, I know how thick to make the spine, what size to make the cover, and I make the cover. All right? And then I sew those pages into my cover, sometimes with a 3-hole pamphlet stitch and sometimes with a 5-hole pamphlet stitch, sometimes with a long stitch. There's so many different ways to sew a book together. So then you've got your signatures in a book. So another question that I get a lot is, I've got these threads that I sewed the signature together with. What do I do with the threads? I usually leave them. If I'm working on a page, I glue stuff over those threads. They're there to anchor those pages together. It doesn't really matter. So I do use a light colored thread so I can put anything over the top of them and you won't see the thread underneath. Sometimes I can't find the threads, and sometimes I can find the threads and I don't do anything with them. You can see here, and you see there's a light colored thread. That's what I sewed the signature together with. And then there's this dark black thread. That's the thread that I sewed the book together with. Usually if I see the other thread, I will remove it because that's a little distracting. But in this case, obviously I didn't. I don't know why I didn't. So yes, if I see the thread there, I'll take it out. If I don't see the thread, I just poke my holes and sew the signature into my cover, and I don't worry about the threads that are there that were holding the signature together. All right? I think that's everything. That's my most asked question. What do I do with the thread when I sew it into the book? Most of the time, it is still in the signature, but I've probably glued something over it so I don't see it. If I see it, I take it out. I do it both ways. It doesn't change anything. I love working in signatures. It makes my life so much easier. I don't have to worry about anything, and I get to make a great cover for the book when all the signatures are finished. I don't have to worry about, oh, I should have done that. I should have made the cover, the spine bigger. I take all the guesswork out of it. I can use whatever paper I want to use. If I want to use a cardstock, which this is, or I want to use a thinner paper if I'm gluing a lot of stuff in, I can use whatever I want to. I can use color, paper, anything. So I hope that answers some questions. It is just easier to demonstrate, to show, than it is to write out these lengthy answers. If you do have any questions, please put them in the comments below. I will try to address them in a later video. Hope you try this because I really like it. Thanks for watching.